Who's going to lead us in prayer?
The guy says, we need to give you dinner.
Our Heavenly Father, we do give you thanks for this day. We give you thanks for our country, for the heritage that we all share. And I pray, O Lord, that you make us to be mindful where our fathers and mothers came from the rock from which we are hewn. Let us look back into the Lord Jesus Christ and to that faith in a Savior that gave himself to save us from our sins and to give us a law whereby we should live. And make us mindful of those things, especially at this time when we're having election of leaders. Help our leaders to understand that they're supposed to be servant leaders, and help us to elect those who are worthy. And may they seek to honor you in all that they do. And may we turn our hearts back into thee. Bless us, guard our children, give us wisdom in all that we do. For it's in the name of Christ our Lord we pray. Amen.
Amen. Please remain standing for the pledge. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Appreciate everybody coming out tonight. My name is Dave Vance. I'm the co-chapter leader for the Henry, Stewart, and Benton County TFA, Tennessee Firearms Association. We're the only no-compromise firearms organization in Tennessee. Now, most of you, I'm sure, are familiar with the NRA. Some of you are familiar with the organization. But I can tell you that at the state level in Tennessee, it is the TFA every year during session that's actually fighting to keep our Second Amendment rights and to expand our ability to all the places that we can go armed and defend ourselves. If you remember several years ago, you couldn't have a weapon in a restaurant. You couldn't have it here. You couldn't have it there. We can have it a lot more places. As a matter of fact, our permit, that's something that the TFA was involved with years ago. Our main speaker tonight is John Harris. He's the founder and he's the current executive director. He'll be here in just a few minutes and he can fill you in on a whole lot more about the organization and what's going on in the Tennessee legislature. I can just tell you that, like I said, a lot of people think Tennessee is a pro-gun state. Well, most of the people are. I tell you what, it's like pulling teeth to get anything done up in the legislature. And we got a Republican supermajority, so-called. So he's going to give you some good information tonight. Before John gets here, we do have our soon-to-be state representative, Jay Reedy, who is pro-Second Amendment. He's been supported by the TFA and he's supported TFA legislation, I guess, every year since you've been up there. So he's a much better talker than me, and I'm going to turn it over to Jay.
Thanks, Dave. Appreciate the opportunity to be here and to speak, and I appreciate all of you that are attending and actually for your attention as well, because there are many things going on. And because of redistricting, of course, that's where I'm losing Montgomery County and the western part of Montgomery County, Clarksville. And I was told that about 4 years ago. It's growing so fast they need to take me out of there and replace that district with just one person. And which means I've got Humphreys and Houston County, and then they said, well, through redistricting, you're gonna lose that, but you can't go east, you gotta go west. And so I was kind of like the last one to know what my new House district was going to be. And so I picked up Benton County and Stewart County and a portion of Henry County. And actually it's like 2/3 of Paris, the city of Paris. And it was an interesting email that I received from the mayor of Paris, and it was kind of like, we think you're possibly going to be one of our new state reps. And I met with him, the county mayor, and then the economic community, or the economic development director, I think is his real title. But anyway, I ended up having lunch with them, and they were concerned in the breaking up of Henry County. And I said, look, fellas, I'm coming from a county that has 3 state reps. Don't you think 2 voices are better than one? That, you know, the economic growth that Henry County is set on. I look forward to serving with Tandy Darby. He's one of our newer members, but I appreciate him. And of course, Humphreys County, they're about the 1-year anniversary of the flood, the destruction. And a little bit about Tandy Darby, if you're from Henry County, and maybe none of you are, but anyway, he calls me on the phone. He said, Jay, he said, I got a buddy. We want to come to Humphreys County and set up in Waverly and feed 300 people. And I said, that's awesome. I mean, it was just the outpour of love and support that we had in Humphreys County. And that's what this Tandy Darby guy is all about. And I do serve with him on the Ag Committee. But getting back to TFA, and of course John Harris is here. We've become good friends over the years. And it was before I was elected to office, I met John Harris, and it was at a meeting very similar to this. But I want to go back in time. It was growing up as a young boy, the latter 60s, early 70s, learning to fish and hunt. And growing up in Idaho, a small town, Payette, Idaho. And through that time, you start to see things going on with hunting, with fishing, the shooting sports, with firearms. And so I started to save my money. By 1985, I become a life member of North American Hunting Club, because we see how difficult it is to hunt. I get the family dog. He loved to pheasant hunt just as much as I did, and I had a 20 gauge shotgun, and I had permission from everybody where I could, in walking distance, to go pheasant hunting for the day. And it was usually just me and the dog outing was Thanksgiving morning. And then slowly over time, because people disrespect other people's property, we started getting locked out. Or you had to pay a fee for hunting. And it was stuff that we started seeing happen across our country. But then I was always a member of the NRA, and by 1986 I became a life member of NRA 2. And then it was several years ago I met John Harris and hear him speak, and I'm like, well, I become a life member of TFA as well. And because it does make a difference, and a lot of folks, it's interesting when you talk about politicians and politics that they show up, and yes, I'm a supporter of the NRA, and I have to tell people, I said, well, as a life member in 1986 of the NRA, and it wasn't on my bucket list to run for office, but like many of you, I got disgusted with our government. And at that time, the first thing was wanting to take God out of everything we were doing. And I said, no way. And of course, my wife, I guess I was the political active one. It was whenever I get in a crowd and want to talk politics, it was like, tried to shush me, hush, it's just, you're getting loud, settle down. And then it was the gay and lesbian movement was going on, and they were saying to me as a Christian, you get to sit at the back of the bus and we're driving. And I said, oh, no, you're not. Now, I want to clarify something. I got a couple cousins that are lesbians, and I got an uncle that's gay. I don't hate them because I'm told not to hate as a Christian. But when we start taking one person's rights away and then giving them to another, we got a problem in this country. And I'd get on a platform, my soapbox, and I would speak what I think are the truths. And people said, well, you need to go to Washington, D.C. And I said, oh, no. Oh, no. Right here, small town USA, with us working together, we can push those issues to Washington, D.C. And that's how we need to get it done. And we got a pretty good movement going on, especially with Trump. But if you've been watching the polls, what's going on, they finally released them. It was like Houston County, early voting, the number 2 highest ranking county in the state. And I believe it, I'm pulling from recall, and I think Stewart County is number 8. And of course, it's quite a bit of the small towns make the top 10, and it's like, wow. So I don't know what they're doing in that. I don't care what they're doing in Nashville. Big cities, it's crazy. I mean, it's just having dinner with some friends from Houston County. We were talking about that, the RNC trying to come to Nashville, and of course, Nashville's having that discussion tonight, adding some more nonsense amendments on the bill to make Nashville feel better. And I said, Nashville doesn't deserve to have the Republican National Convention there. Not trying to be ugly about it, but do you know the debt for Nashville-Davidson County is more than the entire state of Tennessee? It's unreal. And every time we try to help Nashville out to generate the dollars, the income, they shut us Republicans out, and so it becomes a big problem. So Dave, can I introduce John?
Absolutely.
Anyway, John Harris, I appreciate him and his folks, and they've got an upcoming fundraiser. If you're not familiar with that going on, it's September 4th, that's correct?
Third, Saturday,
September 3rd, it's that Saturday. Always a great event. If you like guns, I do. If you like outdoor equipment, I do. There's a lot going on there. Get to meet a lot of higher up politicians or respectable people there that I've become friends with, you know, the McCalls. Just a great event. But anyway, my good friend, John Harris, is here to lay down the law and talk about our next hopes and dreams for the state of Tennessee. Yes, sir.
Jay, I'm gonna blow your horn a little bit. Thank you for everything you've done for Houston County.
Yes, sir. I am honored to serve, and with that, in my office is my assistant is Jennifer, and when she came to me 5.5, 6 years ago, I said, Jennifer, when the phone rings, we answer it. If it's a Tennessean, they are a constituent. We're not passing the buck. I don't care who their state rep or senator is. If they got a problem, let's solve the problem.
Thank you.
Let's not pass them on. And it's many people. Well, it was the Cumberland City Mayor who said, you've always been there for us, and you don't even represent us. He said, now finally I get to vote for you. It was just like Sheriff Gray here. He calls me on the phone, I guess it was about a month ago. He said, I'm excited to get you as our state rep. And he said, I supported you ever since I've been in office, and now I finally get to vote for you. And I appreciate all those folks.
Another thank you for the copies of the state constitution that you gave right-way cards to.
Absolutely.
I realize I'm Montgomery County, but you were mine.
Yeah, I'm losing some good people in Montgomery County. They don't want to give me up, and I see a few of them here with us this evening. Anyway, John, tell us about it.
I'm very grateful to be here tonight. Jay, thank you for the introduction. I will say real quick that Jay has been a regular attendee at the TFA's PAC events for a number of years. He's been not just an attendee, but one of our sponsors. And he, I think, was actually the first state legislator to buy a ticket this year when we announced tickets were open. So looking forward to having you there. The box that Dave asked me to bring in is one of the auction guns. I had to stop in Clarksville and pick it up on the way. That's why I ran late. It's a CMP Garand that we'll be auctioning off. We had one last year, and we've got, unfortunately, another one this year. They seem to go really well at the auctions. And we've got a pretty good gun package so far. So if you don't have your tickets, I would encourage you to go ahead and get them. It helps us plan the event, set up the tables, and order the food and all that kind of stuff. So if possible, make sure to put the event on your schedule and then plan to be there. Our guest speaker this year is going to be Eric Pratt, Senior Vice President of Gun Owners of America. And I think he's got plenty to talk about as long as Biden's in office. So we're going to eat barbecue and listen to Eric talk a little bit, and it ought to be a good event. And we'll have the main activities will be the gun auction and the other auction items. But thank you. How many of you are TFA members? A few hands. How many of you are gun owners? See, now that's more likely. You know, one of the things that I do, I'm a practicing attorney. I live in Nashville. I've been practicing law for 36 years, and I've been the executive director for TFA now for almost 28 years. And one of the things that I do for TFA is I'm the one that handles the amicus briefs. And the amicus briefs refer to situations, usually at the appellate or the Supreme Court level, where an organization like TFA says to the court, hey, I'm not one of the litigants in the case, but our constituents, our members are interested in the outcome of the case, and we'd like permission to file a brief to raise some issues that may not be briefed by the other parties. And in the last 3.5 years, TFA has filed 11 of those briefs. We're working on one now that we will propose at the state level involving the case against TWRA that has to do with whether or not TWRA officers can come on private property and search without having to get a search warrant. As a hunter, that's something I'm real interested in, and I hope that case stays as the trial court ruled and prohibits TWRA from continuing to do that going forward. But these are the kinds of things that the TFA and the TFA's PAC, TFA LAC, which is the event that puts on the auction, does, and does for the benefit of the members in Tennessee. And most of the work is all done by volunteers. What I want to talk about tonight, though, is an issue that is wearing my ears out in Davidson County as I listen to campaign ads. And it's, you know, driving along in your car, and you hear something on the radio, and you just got to respond to it. And for me in Nashville during campaign season, it is candidates running for office telling me that they're good on the Second Amendment, and then immediately saying they helped pass constitutional carry in Tennessee. Now, those two, if you're good on the Second Amendment, then what we passed in 2021 is not good for the Second Amendment. You can't have both, okay? And that's what I want to talk about tonight. When I was, one of the cases that TFA briefed in the U.S. Supreme Court last year was the New York State Rifle and Pistol Association case that was decided in June by the U.S. Supreme Court in an opinion written by Justice Thomas. They struck down New York's licensing laws. And because I was one of the attorneys involved, I was actually listening to the oral arguments, although they were streamed, so I could do it in my office instead of having to go to DC because no sane person wants to be in DC. So I'm listening to the oral arguments, and one of the questions from one of the justices to one of the attorneys advocating for keeping the New York licensing scheme, one of the questions that was asked by the judge was, can you give us some historical examples of states which have a history, a long, consistent history, of prohibiting their citizens from carrying firearms for self-defense? The first state mentioned was Tennessee. And that was irritating. But I also agree that that was an accurate statement. You know, Tennessee spun off from North Carolina, became a state in 1796, and for the entire history of our state, we have had laws on the books that made it a crime to carry a firearm with the intent to go armed. It has come through various versions over the years because the wording of the individual statutes would change from time to time. But essentially, from the very day that we became a state, our laws, not our Constitution, but our laws in the state have made it a crime for you to carry a firearm, or your ancestors, for purposes of going armed. That's currently the law in Tennessee. If you wanted to look it up, you look at Tennessee Code Annotated 39-17-1307A1. It's one sentence. One sentence that says it's an offense to carry a firearm with the intent to go armed. It also used to have knives in it, but they took those out years ago. But firearms are still prohibited weapons in terms of you being able to carry. I forgot to turn something off, didn't I? And the existence of that statute and its predecessors is why it was so accurate for those attorneys in the New York rifle case to tell the court that Tennessee has a long history. Currently, the law in Tennessee, and it has been this way since I got my law license, with one minor exception, okay? One minor exception I'll tell you about. But currently the law in Tennessee basically says it's a crime for citizens to carry a firearm with the intent to go armed. We have 4 statutory exceptions or defenses to that crime. Now, the word statutory defense and statutory exception are Alice in Wonderland phrases when you look at the Tennessee statutes, because they don't mean what the average person thinks they should mean. Okay? A statutory defense means that you can be arrested, you can be charged, and you can be taken to trial in a criminal proceeding with a jury. And if it's a statutory defense, the burden is on you, the accused, to demonstrate to the jury that you fit within the elements of the defense. If you can show that, then the burden shifts to the state to negate that evidence, to show the jury somehow that you lied to them, basically, or that some aspect of the elements aren't applicable to your case. The other phrase that we see in our statutes, and it's the phrase that's used in the governor's permitless carry law from 2021, is that it is an exception to a criminal offense if blah, blah, blah occurs, okay? The problem with calling something an exception in our statutes is it's very similar to a defense. You can be arrested, you can be charged, you can be indicted. The DA can continue with your prosecution, and you could be called upon to show up in front of a jury, unless you just want a default to go down against you. And it's your burden as the accused, if it's a statutory exception, to prove the elements of the exception. The difference is, if it's an exception, the burden never shifts to the state to negate it. You still bear the burden at the trial, in the criminal case, of convincing the jury that you meet all the elements of the exception. Okay? So that's Tennessee's structure. If a citizen wants to carry or transport a firearm in Tennessee, we have 2 statutory defenses. That's the enhanced permit and the concealed only permit. You have the right to show up in front of a jury and prove to them you've got a valid permit. And we have 2 statutory exceptions. One is the vehicle transport law, which says if you legally possess the weapon and you legally possess the motor vehicle, you can transport it without having to have a permit. That lets us transport rifles and shotguns, loaded or unloaded, in most places. And then we have the permitless carry law that was passed last year, which has 7 conditions on it that you're responsible for proving to the jury should you get caught. Now the practical fact is, whether you get arrested or charged is to a large extent up to the discretion of the officer that stopped you. Okay? You've all seen maybe the YouTube videos, somebody gets pulled over, they don't know how to control their mouth, or they jump out of the car and the officer's telling them not to do it. That'll get you arrested, and you may have to prove to the jury that you have the defense. But in most instances, even in Davidson County, if you behave when you get pulled over or stopped, and you cooperate with the officer and you follow their instructions and you don't give them a reason to believe that you're a threat to their safety, and you give them a valid permit, they're gonna look at it and they're gonna take it back to their car, they're gonna call it in, they're gonna see if it's valid, if it's been revoked, if it's been suspended, and if everything's okay, they're probably gonna let you go. They don't have to. That's the difference. An officer, though, is not inclined to prosecute somebody if they're gonna lose the case once they get to trial. So they'll have officer discretion on whether or not to bring the charge. With the governor's law, there's no permit, but there are 7 conditions. So what happens is, if the officer pulls that person over, they got 7 issues they've got to look at, the officer does, in deciding whether or not to charge them or let them go. Now, that's Tennessee's structure at present. That's why those attorneys told the Supreme Court we have a long history. And we currently have a situation that's consistent with that long history of oppressive action by the Tennessee General Assembly. Okay? And I'll tell you right now, it's not Jay Reedy that's doing it, and it's not people, his peers that are doing it. It's the fact that we've got a Republican supermajority in the House and in the Senate, the majority of which refuse to pass real constitutional carry. They're more comfortable, and I'll tell you, there's a lot of pressure. I think there's a lot of pressure on the legislators from law enforcement, the Sheriff's Association, and the Chiefs of Police, and the District Attorney's Conference to continue to allow officers to stop people. And here's why. Let's assume, let me back up just a second. When I started doing this in 94, 95, we had a phrase that we talked about when we would go see legislators, and the phrase was Vermont carry. Any of you familiar with that terminology, Vermont carry? Vermont carry was the terminology we used back then because Vermont was the only state in the nation in the mid-90s that had in its state constitution a provision that said citizens have a right to carry weapons for self-defense in public. Get that, Vermont.
Wow.
And they've had it in their constitution since they became a state in the 1700s. They were the only state in the nation that had that language. Now, after a few years, and after talking for several years about Vermont carry, Vermont style carry, other states started picking it up and adopting that same trend. And there's a subset of Vermont carry, what we now call real constitutional carry. There's a subset of it that has to do with open carry. So you always have had states, North Carolina's an example, Kentucky's an example, and actually every state that touches Tennessee but Georgia could be listed as an example of this subset called open carry. And what an open carry state was, because my wife's from Hopkinsville, Kentucky, I could carry in Hopkinsville, Kentucky long before I could carry a firearm legal in Tennessee. Because an open carry state, the only requirement is that the weapon has to be visible. But the nuance between that and Tennessee is, in a constitutional carry state, a Vermont carry state, or even an open carry state, the difference is engaging in that conduct isn't a crime, okay? It's not a defense to a crime, it's not an exception to a crime, it's not a crime. And that's a big difference when we get to the issue of interactions with police officers. And this open carry history that's existed in a lot of the nation is what gave rise to the terminology concealed weapons permit. Okay, CCWs. And it was because in states like Kentucky and North Carolina and others, you could carry the weapon openly. It wasn't a crime, you didn't have to have a permit. But if you wanted to conceal it or holster it, or put it in a briefcase or a backpack, that was concealment and that required a permit in those states. That's why we have concealed weapon terminology. Something that really doesn't apply in Tennessee until 2 years ago. So, what real constitutional carry means, and the reason you hear TFA talk about, and some legislators talk about, and TFA write about real constitutional carry, it is a situation where in that state, in that jurisdiction, it's just not a crime for a citizen to carry a firearm for any lawful purpose, predominantly for self-defense. And as we discussed a few moments ago, Tennessee doesn't have that kind of law. We've got just the inverse. In Tennessee, any carry of a firearm with the intent to go armed is a crime, and you've got to be able to show that you fit within one of the defenses. Now, I told you there's 4 primary defenses. The enhanced permit, the concealed only permit, permitless vehicle transport, and now the governor's permitless carry law. But there are other defenses. And some of these, I think, is really unfortunate, but it's very telling of the disposition of the General Assembly. One of the defenses, and you can look these up, they're in Tennessee Code Annotated 39-17-1308, one of the defenses is you're at your own residence. Now think about that. Do any of you have the belief, or do you think the general public has the belief, that it's a crime to carry a firearm with intent to go armed on your own property? Under state law, it is. It's a crime to carry a firearm with the intent to go armed at your own business. At another piece of property you may own that you don't live on. There's a series of about 11 of these defenses that most people would think in Tennessee shouldn't even be a crime. Things like hunting and target shooting. But the way the statutes are written in Tennessee is, should an officer decide to take it out on you, you might have to prove to a jury, if you just got the short end of the stick, that you fit within one of those defenses in order to get your acquittal. Now, like I said earlier, the officer may not decide to charge if he thinks you've got a good defense and they can't convict you. Or the DA may decide not to charge if he doesn't think he can get his conviction. But if you're on the south end of the officer's discretion, they may decide to charge you just to, get a little bit of harassment factor out of it. And don't think for a moment that won't happen in Nashville or in Memphis. It may not happen up here, but it certainly could happen in some of these other jurisdictions, because I've practiced in Nashville for long enough to know. That's why it's critical that we keep talking to our legislators and our elected officials, particularly during the campaign cycles, about we need real constitutional carry. Because when you say that, what you need to be able to tell them is, not what you passed in 2021. We don't want it to be a crime for me to exercise my Second Amendment rights. And then have a defense burden put on my back. The way the law should be is it's just not a crime. And the crime should come in if I abuse that right, if I misuse that right, if I use a firearm in the commission of a violent crime or some other criminal act, but not just simply walking around with a firearm for self-defense. That shouldn't be a crime. Now, you look at, like I said, the national radio ads. One in particular that's running is Jack Johnson. He's a state senator, and he was the sponsor of the governor's permitless carry law. And he's got it on his website. He's running radio ads about how he helped pass constitutional carry. But what that tells me is they're either intentionally lying or they don't know what they passed. But which one's worse? I don't want either one. I don't want a Nancy Pelosi style, let's pass it first and then figure out what it does. It's a short bill, read it and figure it out before you pass it, because it's sure not what you're saying it is. The other problem I have sometimes when legislators say things like, Tennessee has constitutional carry, is Second Amendment's pretty simple to understand. It's one sentence, and it's not even a full sentence. Part of it's just a paraphrase. And the concept of constitutional carry, if I can legally own a gun, I ought to be able to carry it, isn't a difficult concept to grasp. But if they're getting that wrong, if they're getting that one wrong, are you really that comfortable that they're going to get right bigger issues like 10th Amendment, how to stand up to the federal government, whether or not we should have light bulbs that really work, whether or not a toilet should actually flush something more than a sniffle of paper? If they can't get the Second Amendment issue right, or be honest about it, can you really have that much comfort and confidence that they're going to be good for you on other conservative issues? I don't think so. And that's why TFA uses the Second Amendment concept as a litmus test. Now, you don't have to raise your hand, but when I speak to groups like this, I do ask the question of anybody, is there anybody that either yourself or you know someone that's relying on the permitless carry law rather than getting a permit in Tennessee right now? You don't have to raise your hand unless you're just, overly zealous. I will tell you, don't do it. don't rely on that law. And tell your friends, your family, and even people you don't like, unless you want to see them in jail, not to rely on that law. Because there's a lot of problems with it. I told you that an officer, if they see you, they can stop you and check you for 7 conditions on whether you're eligible or not to carry under that law. That's going to take a while because some of it is easy to check and some of it isn't. That also raises this other problem with not just the permitless carry law, but the entire, it's a crime and we've got defenses, okay? Think about this. If you're in a state like Kentucky, North Carolina, or one of the other almost 25 states where it's not a crime, if you're out walking on the street or driving in your car and the officer sees you with a gun, in those states, it's not a crime. So in those states, the officer doesn't have probable cause to stop you just because they saw you carrying a gun, okay? Think about how that's different in Tennessee. The crime in Tennessee is carrying with the intent to harm. In Tennessee, if an officer sees you coming in this building, walking down the street in a park, carrying a gun, they've seen you commit a crime. Legally, it's not their burden, it's not their issue, it's not their problem whether or not you've got a defense. The moment they see you carrying in Tennessee, and this is why I think the sheriffs, the DAs, chiefs of police want to fight us on this issue, is the moment they see a citizen carrying in public, they have the legal authority to stop and detain you, shake you down, and figure out whether or not you're the good guy or not. That's a real big issue in Nashville. That's a real big issue in Memphis. It's a growing issue in Clarksville, Chattanooga, Jackson, and Knoxville. But should that be the way it is if we're talking about a constitutionally protected right? Think about it. Should an officer have the ability under the First Amendment, because they see me up here speaking, to come in and arrest me, detain me, stop me, to figure out whether or not I'm saying something that's permissible or not? We wouldn't tolerate that. But citizens in this state are tolerating, and I don't know why. They're tolerating the persistence of a legal system, a statutory scheme, where they can be stopped on the street just for exercising a right protected by the Constitution. And think about it. The only item of personal property, that the Constitution protects to your individual ownership and possession is the firearm. There's not even an amendment that talks about your right to keep a Bible. But you got one that says you can continue keep firearms. And yet Tennessee is allowing our legislature and our governor to continue to tell us, if you carry it in public, we're going to stop you. And we have the right to stop you because it just looks suspicious. And I don't think that's the way it ought to be. But getting back to the governor's permitless carry, you got the 7 conditions. Officer sees you on the street, he can stop you and see if you meet those conditions. But there's other problems with it. So for example, we have a law in Tennessee, 39-17-1311, that says you can't carry into a public park or recreational facility. So basically, it's against the law to have a firearm in your possession in a public park, on a greenway, in a public campground, or even a civic center, okay? That's a crime. We have a specific amendment to that statute that came about in 2008 that creates an exception. Again, you've got to prove that you fit within the exception, but there's an exception if you have the handgun permit. When they passed the law for permitless carry in 2021, there's this huge trap in it. They told us it was constitutional carry, but if you carry in a park or on a greenway or in a forested area or in a civic center without a permit, you can be arrested. And there's not a defense to that one. Unless maybe you somehow can persuade him that you didn't know you had a gun on you. Which is possible. I've seen my wife's purse. She's not here tonight, so I get away with that. And none of you call her before I get home. But there's other problems with it. As a practical matter, I'll give you another, and this has nothing to do with whether or not you can be arrested or criminally charged. This has to do with what happened, for example, at the mall shooting we just had in the last 2 weeks, where the guy pulled the gun and shot the shooter. So anytime, this is the attorney in me, anytime you have a shooting incident involving a civilian using deadly force, you have the possibility of criminal charges. That kid could get charged. I think in Tennessee, he likely would get charged in a blue city. Okay? You also have the possibility of civil damages. Being sued by the person that got shot or by the family of the person that got killed, claiming that you shouldn't have shot him. I mean, I've heard it. I mean, they'll say stupid stuff like, well, you could have winged him. You know, why didn't you just shoot his knees? It's because your obligation is to eliminate the threat, not wing it. That just makes them matter, you know? So, think about this. If you're going to carry a gun in Tennessee for self-defense under the current structure of things, and you get involved into a self-defense incident like the young man in the mall, or the guy in the church shooting in Texas a few years ago, and somebody gets hurt that's an innocent bystander, or you're in the mall and you successfully shoot the bad guy, but you know he hit him 8 out of 10 times, where'd the other 2 go? There could be a huge fish tank with dead fish in it somewhere. But that bullet, every bullet that you fire as a civilian, you're responsible for whatever damage it does, whether you hit the bad guy or not. So one of the issues is, from a civil liability perspective, is when you go in front of the jury in a civil case, like the car wreck case, okay, is the average juror who may be from a blue city, who may be anti-gun, who may think Joe Biden's brilliant, are they going to be more likely to think you are acting reasonable and cautious and responsible by having the enhanced permit versus watching a 90-minute online video to get the concealed only permit versus the new permitless carry law where you don't have to do anything? You just start carrying, and they cross-examine you at trial, and they ask you when's the last time you practiced, and you can say, me and Bubba went out and shot beer cans off a bale of hay just 2 weeks ago. And that ain't gonna sound too good. So we're moving in a direction where Tennessee at some point is going to get real constitutional carry. And as a constitutional advocate, we need it, we should have had it by now. But I do believe, if for no other reason, reciprocity, that we will continue to have handgun permits available to us. Because if you have constitutional carry, that doesn't mean you can carry in another state unless that state also has it and extends it to non-residents. But we've got 38 states that honor our permit, the enhanced permit. As a matter of fact, every state that touches Tennessee, plus Florida and Texas, honors our permit. And as a practical matter, why would you want to go anywhere else? You know? So, even if we get constitutional carry, we're still going to have, I think, the permitting system, and we're at least going to have the enhanced permit. So while I'm a big advocate for we need constitutional carry, because I don't want the cop to have the right to stop me for carrying a gun if that's what I want to do, and I don't want to have the burden of proving I was justified in exercising their constitutionally protected right, the benefits are still there for the enhanced permit. Reciprocity, and it's evidence you can give to a jury if you're ever this guy that's in the mall that shoots somebody, that shows you underwent a course of training that included live fire that was developed by the state of Tennessee, which is better than I shot beer cans off a bale of hay. So you want to do it. Now, where I want to end up is this area. Y'all got Jay Reedy, and Jay does a great job. I've known Jay. I first met Jay before he ran. Jay and his family both. I think it was over in Paris. Humphreys, yeah, is where we first met. But I'm gonna tell you this: you can vote for Jay and contribute to Jay and support Jay all you want. But if you're not helping, it's a chessboard, folks, okay? And until we get a majority on the chessboard of 99 House members, until we get 50 of them that are conservatives, Jay's hands are tied. You're gonna send him up there to do stuff, and he's gonna put the bills in to do it, but he may not even get a second in the committee to move the bill forward, because we don't have a majority of real conservatives. So while you may have a great situation in your own district, you gotta look, and this is one of the things TFA does. We look statewide, and we basically go, okay, this election cycle, where's the low-hanging fruit? Where are 5 or 10 House seats where we can pick off rhinos or establishment, or what I call Chamber of Commerce Republicans, who've had the opportunity to vote for things like constitutional carry, or the elimination of gun-free zones, or actually reducing taxes in Tennessee, and I mean across the board, not just one here and one there. Okay? I'll take an aside real quick. Think about this. The GOP took control of Tennessee in November 2010. They've had full control of the governor's office and the General Assembly since 2011. When they got control in 2011, the state's budget was approximately $28 billion. Other than Jay, you can tell me what the current budget is.
This is 40, isn't it?
53 billion.
Increase about $1 billion a year.
Yeah, but how does that happen if they're cutting taxes? Are they printing money like Biden does? We can't do that at the state level. So, yeah, there are taxes that got cut. The hall tax has been eliminated. They reduced the professional privilege tax on some people. There are some taxes that went down. The gas tax wasn't one of them. You know? And we're running, what, somewhere between $2 and $4 billion surplus? Our taxes, some of our taxes may have gone down, but the tax burden, as reflected by the size of the budget, has gone up. And I know a lot of it comes from federal money that's kicked back to us. That's still tax money. It's coming out of somebody's pocket. It's either our pocket or our kids' pockets. But when the budget doubles in 12 years, we ain't cutting taxes. But where I was is it's a chess game. Okay? We want to keep Jay. We want to keep other House members and a handful of senators that are like-minded with Jay. They will carry the same kind of legislation. They'll vote what he puts in. They'll help him get it out of committee if they're on those committees. But folks, we have too many Republicans in Tennessee that control the committees that will not push forward real conservative legislation.
Amen.
And if you want to be able to send Jay up there and have Jay have success on the topics that he tells you that he stands up for you and supports, then it's critical that you look in the other counties and help races in other counties, to make sure we get conservatives there as opposed to just more rhinos.
Can you talk a little bit about the Senate?
Yes, very quick.
Before we go to the Senate, let's quickly talk about the House, because we're going to get 15 to maybe 18 new members.
We are.
And so it's going to be a huge turnover come November. From the TFA point of view, what does that look like? I mean, do we got some good prospects?
We do. Our numbers right now, we're projecting somewhere between 5 and 8 conservatives coming in. Okay? That's what it looks like to us. We think to flip, and keep in mind, the House caucus is 74, 74, okay? House caucus of Republicans. The real critical mass is to get a majority of the House Republican caucus, okay? Which is easier than getting a majority, getting to 50 of the total House. And the reason it's critical to get to the majority in the caucus of real conservatives is the caucus picks the speaker. And the speaker picks the committee chairs. And we either need to have a speaker that's having an epiphany about what the Constitution means, or we need a new speaker, in my opinion. And I would say, generally, I think the House, from a conservative's perspective, is in better shape than the Senate. I think, particularly with McNally in charge. There are some senators over there that we like, that carry bills for us, that do a good job. I tell you, I think one of the best speech makers in the Senate is Kerry Roberts. And I appreciate the fact that he serves on Senate Judiciary where our bills go. Paul Bailey works with us and does a good job. Joey Hensley does a good job. Mark Pody does a good job. Janice Bowling does a good job. But we don't have enough. We got 33 senators, and I can't name 15 that I would say are strong for us. And that's reflected in the kinds of legislation that's coming out and getting killed. Because keep in mind, when the governor's 2021 permitless carry law sailed through the system, there were 2 bills pending, one by Bruce Griffey and one by Chris Todd, that would have deleted the sentence that's the problem in Tennessee. And they couldn't get those bills to the floor. And that's a problem with the caucus.
Even though they were promised.
Even though they were promised. Yeah. Yeah. The promises, in my opinion, in the General Assembly are about the same quality of truthfulness as teenage boys make on Saturday nights at the drive-in movie theater to their dates. And they last about as long. But that's where we are. And I'm glad to answer any questions you might have, because I've seen a lot of nodding. Fortunately, nobody's fallen asleep, but it is getting late. Yeah.
Can we get constitutional carry with Lee in office?
Yes, because we have had a couple of instances that we've done this. For example, back when Bredesen was in, we passed some good gun laws and he vetoed them. Tennessee's got the weakest governor in the nation under our Constitution, because all it takes is a simple majority to override a veto. So we can absolutely pass it. We did it on gun bills when Bredesen was there. The problem is, will House and Senate leadership, Sexton and McNally, override a Republican governor? You know, that may not be, technically, yes, we can. Is there enough political pressure for them to do it? Now, as Lee gets closer to 2026 and somebody else is going to run for governor, that may be more probable. But right now, they're all playing in the same sandbox.
Is that where we're gonna put John Rich in
John Rich,
for governor?
if he'll do it.
I would love it. I keep tweeting him.
There's another country artist I would like. Yeah. Yes.
You keep saying intending to go armed. Why would you carry a gun if you weren't intending to go armed? Explain that.
We have had that phrase in our statutes since the early 1800s that I know of, since 1801. There are maybe 5 court decisions which have looked at the issue of what is the intent to go armed.
I can kind of think on that.
Yeah, there's one Supreme Court decision from the 1800s where the guy got convicted of carrying with intent to go armed. And according to the court, the facts were a bear was ransacking the community and this guy picked up a handgun. He could have picked up a rifle and would have been okay. But he picked up a handgun and chased the bear. And he got convicted for carrying the handgun with the intent to go armed. And it went all the way to the Tennessee Supreme Court. And the court, in a 1-paragraph opinion, reversed the conviction and said, well, intent to go armed means that he has to have either offensive or defensive purposes. Well, okay, I understand that, but isn't that what he had when he picked up the gun to chase the bear? So there's no real clear guidance. I mean, what I have seen is people, I've seen Metro police officers charge people because they had a gun in a box they just bought, like over there, just bought at a gun store and was taking it home. And I've seen them charge carrying a firearm. And it was, yeah, oh yeah. I had, the most recent one I had a guy who's wearing camo, head to toe, he had camo on, he's in a 4-door sedan. He had turkey decoys in the back seat. He had a camo shotgun laying in the back seat floorboard with an open bolt and there was no ammunition in it. Nobody asserted there was ammo in it. He had 3 empty shotgun shells, he had 3 shotgun shells laying on the passenger seat. A Metro Nashville police officer arrested him and charged him with carrying a shotgun with the intent to go armed. Because the definition of a loaded firearm in Tennessee is not what we think it is. There's a firearm and there's ammunition in the vicinity of the firearm.
It's almost like Illinois.
Well, it's Alice in Wonderland.
What about this 21 to 18, all this that's changed too?
Yeah, the 21 to 18 stuff is going to be interesting, particularly now that the New York rifle case came down. Because, you know, when they passed, there's a provision in our permit law, and then when they passed the permitless carry law, they adopted the same language that says you got to be 21 and up to carry a handgun. And it's based upon the misconception that 18-year-olds can't buy handguns. And that's not true. 18-year-olds can't buy handguns from licensed dealers, but they can buy them from individuals. So when they put this new language in the permit law and it's in the permitless carry one, it says you gotta be 21 and up, unless you're 18, 19, or 20 and you're either in the military or honorably discharged from the military. Well, that's pandering and it's also stupid because it's an equal protection violation. They treated one class of 18, 19, 20-year-olds different with respect to a constitutional right than they did another class of 18, 19, 20-year-olds. And there's actually a federal case pending in Knoxville called Bartlett where that's being challenged. But you will see in the not too distant future case law develop that says there's not a constitutional basis to impose a 21 age and up limit on people carrying handguns because you can buy them.
One year we almost passed this, and it got to the Senate, or to a committee in the Senate. Somebody who said they were going to vote for it voted against it. Do you remember what year that was? The guy who voted against it was John Stevens.
Yeah, Stevens the one that killed it, and I'm thinking, well, Chris Todd had it last year.
Yeah, but I know about this was several years ago.
We've run that bill several times. We've
Yeah.
tried to get it pushed back down to 18-year-olds.
No, I'm talking about an actual constitutional carry bill.
Oh, that was 2016, Green had it.
Yeah, it was through, and Stevens said he was gonna support it, and then stabbed it back at
Killed
the
it.
last minute.
Voted
That's
against it
still
at the last
21.
minute.
That's our new state senator, by
That's
the
still
way.
21 though, right? The concealed carry permit. You still gotta be 21.
Unless you're 18, 19, or 20 and have connected militaries.
Right.
Yeah. Now, but there's not the permitless vehicle transport where you can drive around with it. You could be 18, handgun, rifle, shotgun, bazooka, machine gun, it don't matter. Loaded or unloaded, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, but you just went over that, where you kinda opened book there.
Yeah, and you just get arrested for it, but you know, you win.
But they haven't changed the 21 and up law with the handgun permit. To take the full course and all that, you still gotta be 21, right?
Unless you're in the military.
Right.
Yeah.
But I mean, not the military.
No,
Just
not the
regular-
military, you're just carry a slingshot, because they're not gonna let you have it.
I got a question. You sort of led into it with a guy with turkey hunting. Back in the 40s, the 50s, up until sometime in the 60s, I come back out of service in the mid-60s. We drove up and down our roads with guns in the back rack of our truck. If it was hunting season or it wasn't hunting season. On the farm I was raised, I was born here in Tennessee, I was raised here in Tennessee. I come back from the service in the mid-60s, they says, you can't do that no more. And me being the hard-headed hillbilly I am, I laid it down in the seat. And now, if the law sees you with a gun in a gun rack in the back of a truck, you're in trouble.
They gonna pull you over?
What has happened? Why back, it was good enough in the 40s, good enough in the 50s and the 60s, why has our government let them change and it's against the law?
Well, I don't know that I've got the answer to why. I just can tell you that it's occurred.
Yeah, I know.
And it's
it did.
occurred because we've elected people to government that don't believe in the Constitution. And we've elected people to government that don't trust citizens with fundamental rights.
But we're all not crazy, and we have respect.
Yeah, but Jay will tell you, I mean, what you see in a meeting like this is a lot different than what a legislator in Memphis and Nashville sees.
Well, they've never been there.
You know,
A lot of us never been there.
y'all have been very polite and stayed awake and all that kind of stuff. You go to a meeting like this in Nashville, half the people trip because they don't have belts coming in the door. You know? It's just pitiful. And it's a change in our society, and we could go into a whole lot of reasons why. You know, federal government took over education with Lamar Alexander. Well, that led to more decline. You know, we've let too many liberals and progressives into our education systems and taken away maybe too much discretion from local education boards. You know, cartoons went from black and white to color. Now kids spend more time staring at cartoons. Yeah, I don't know what all the elements are. I just know that where we are is a problem that we better reverse, because it's not on a trend line right now where it's getting better, and it's not going in the direction across the board of really restoring our rights to where they were 60 years ago. Yeah.
We have a good representative in Jay. How do we go about supporting the candidates in other counties?
Join the
Tell them
TFA.
about your website.
So there's a couple of ways to do it. On the TFA's website, and you can get this information, and you don't even have to be a member, it's free, okay? We do a survey every 2 years of everybody that wants to run for the House, the Senate, or the governor's office. And a small number respond to the surveys and send them back. And what we do that's different than a lot of other organizations, we don't give them a rating and say A, B, or C, and we don't give them an endorsement that is based upon wink, wink, nod, nod, buddy systems, okay? What TFA does is we publish the entire survey. You see every question. And then all of our questions are yes or no. And then we do an Excel grid sheet, and then for every legislator, it tells you how they answered every question. So you can look at the grid sheet and the survey questions, and you'll know how Jay answered. I tell you, Jay answered all 23 correctly.
That would be handy before the local election.
Yeah, and so we put that up there on our website. The other thing that we do is once we get through our vetting processes, and once we get through our survey analysis, the PAC, TFALAC.org, publishes the list of candidates that it actually gives money to. Okay? Now, we don't tell you necessarily how much we give each candidate, because there's a lot that goes into that part. But we do specifically publish who we're financially supporting. And the problem is, I used to work some with the NRA's lobbyists. And the NRA's endorsement system, you know, that ABCDF system they use, they use a feature called olive branch. And their olive branch theory, they used to use it with Jimmy Nafee, and so if they were using it with him, what does that tell you? But their theory was, if we've got a race and we've identified who we think is going to win, either because they don't have a challenger or they got so much money they can't lose. Jimmy Nafee, former Democrat speaker. They will artificially give that person sometimes a good rating, an unearned rating, to extend the olive branch to maintain access to go talk to that person. Because it's an access-based, a friendship-based lobbying system. TFA doesn't use that. You can ask Jay, I burned more bridges up there at the legislature than any other lobbyist dancing around the place, probably. Because TFA operates off of an accountability model. And our accountability model is, we're going to tell you what we want done. We'll help you write it, draft it, explain it to you, help you understand it. And if you oppose it, we'll go find somebody else to run against you. Because life's too short. We don't have time to be buddy-buddy with people that keep voting against our bills. And that makes some of them mad. Because they don't view TFA as a team player. When the Democrats were in control and we were burning their bridges, the Republican minority thought that was great. Until we started doing it to them when they got in the majority and they didn't honor their promises. But so be it. Because I'm not a paid lobbyist, my view is, if I educate the constituents, I don't have to be the buddy of the legislator. I'd just rather have informed constituents that'll pick the phone up and call them and bitch at them. And that carries more volume.
Can I add to this, John?
Sure.
And so with that, many organizations, the veterans, there's the Veterans Day on the Hill, there's TFA Day on the Hill, and of course the shirt that Dave's got on, a lot of times the folks will show up with their TFA shirts on, knocking on doors, coming to the offices. In my opinion, the state of Tennessee's got the best state website. Because a lot of times when I'm working on legislation, I'm looking at other states trying to figure out what other states are doing when it comes to legislation. Anyway, you can go to tn.gov, get on that website, but sign up for emails and put in keywords. You can put in gun or firearms or whatever, and if that ever comes up in a piece of legislation that somebody's working on, you'll get notified that it's going on. But also on that website, you can go down and click on my office and automatically take and send me an email. My phone number's there, my assistant's name's there. And so that's helpful to me. It's a lot of times, you folks will call my office. You're concerned about a certain bill because you've already signed up and maybe it's about medical marijuana, maybe it's guns, maybe it's your profession, whatever it is, that pops up and you'll contact my office and say, hey, I'm looking at this bill. What's going on with this bill? So if it's a firearms bill, it will pop up. Then you'll say, Jay, we need to vote for this or vote against this or just whatever the situation is, because there are just as bad firearm bills as there are good. You know, the Democrats, Mike Stewart, I am so happy that he's leaving. Don't have to put up with him anymore. So, but that's an example. Now, what I'm going to tell all of you is a lot of times, I don't sit on every committee, which means when you call my office and you're concerned about a bill, I will look that up or my assistant will look at it, and maybe it's the first two committees is coming to, I'm not on that committee. Now, I'm not trying to be ugly, but a lot of times is I'm working on my own legislation. I have my own committees, bills that I'm looking at that are coming soon before me. So if I don't sit on that committee, I'll say, okay, keep me posted. If it gets through the second committee and is still alive and has not been amended to death or amended to make better, contact me again and let me know it's still alive. Each year we submit collectively from the House and the Senate about 1,500 bills.
Yeah.
And so with that, when we finally get to the 1,500 bills, there's only about 400 that finally get put on notice and they get serious about it. A lot of House and Senate members, they will file bills that got the good old warm and fuzzy on there just so they'll look good back in their district. They never put them on notice. They never get pushed. It's silly. To me, it's silly. If you're going to be elected and serve, do something. My first year in office, and of course, it's the House members we served for 2 years. I had this little old lady as an assistant. Of course, at the time, Congressman Mark Green was our Senator Mark Green. And Mark Green and I are good buddies. And of course, and he said, okay, I can count on Jay to get this across the finish line. He'd bring me a bill. I'd sign off on it. I'd file it with the clerk. My assistant, about the second or third bill come in, and she says, I hope you know what you're doing. And I said, Miss Cheryl, I max out at 15 bills, right? She said, yep. But the previous rep that she was assistant to would only carry 5 a year. And I said, I know for one thing's for certain, I'm here for 2 years. And I got my 15 bills, and I think 5 of them were from Mark Green as far as our veterans and firearms and all of this stuff. And anyway, so it was the very first committee that I go into, and of course, my time in the military, I know how to stand up to a crowd, but I'm scared to death inside. So I stand up at the podium and I present this bill, unanimously voted out. I go back to the office, and the whole time she was shaking her head, just feeling sorry for me. She said, I think you're going to do fine. and I did, but that's an example, and of course it's a good question. How do we follow what our senators, what our House members are doing statewide? And I hate to say it, when I first got there in the House, it was split into thirds. A third of them were Democrats, the third of them that were middle of the road Republican, and a third of them 99. So we've got 33 House members that I could count on. That's where we were weak at 8 years ago when I got into office. We had a problem with the House. We got that finally straightened out, and then our problem, the weakness, become in the Senate. The weaponization of COVID really screwed us up, big time. And what do I mean by that is the federal dollars, the American Rescue Plan, the federal dollars come into the Department of Education and to the state coffers. And this last 2 years, the way that we're spending money is shameful. And so on one hand, I could count on 5 members, and a couple of those are retiring and not coming back. And it's like, who can I count on now as a Christian conservative to get things done for we the people? Keeping in mind, if there's any locally elected officials here, that this is where you need to be visiting with your city council, school boards, county commissioners, and all of that. The way the money is going to be spent from the federal government, it's our money. It's too bad that there's strings attached for us to get it back. But the way that that money runs out in 2026, I'm telling elected officials, hopefully you're spending it wisely, because it's children we don't even know that we're going to have are stuck with this debt. And my hope is we're working on infrastructure. The water lines, the sewer lines, all of that stuff that is 50, 60 years old, let's upgrade those, let's spend this money wisely. But it's the same thing, it's the future of our country, and it was I don't remember how many years ago working with TFA, what I learned that was in our state constitution, trying to figure out how do we change our state constitution so it reads, and I think it was after the Civil War, we're talking 1860s, but they made a change that was deemed unconstitutional by the Supreme Court, and what it was saying is no black man would go armed. So no, you can't do that. So then they changed our constitution saying, well, going armed, and that was an Arkansas toothpick, a Bowie knife, a gun, a club, or whatever. And what's interesting, me doing my homework on how do we get the true Second Amendment in the state of Tennessee, looking it up, and it was law professors that were teaching what the law was per our Second Amendment rights in the state of Tennessee, and they said they hovered so close of being unconstitutional, but that constitutional amendment for the state of Tennessee stood, and put us in the tailspin that we're currently still in today. So it's a huge lift for us conservative-minded folks, and then that's where I've not been following the races. I got my own race to run, but knowing definitely we're getting 15 new members, and then 3 of my conservative friends got tough races as well. And it's gonna be an interesting elections season come November. I do need to make a correction as far as Houston County was number 3, Stewart County was number 7, number 10 was Benton County as far as voter turnout. John.
Any more questions?
Is Tennessee the only state with that constitutional carry?
No.
That doesn't have it?
Yeah.
No, they're out in New York, California. You know, we have a lot in common with the ones that don't have it.
What was the difference between the enhanced carry and the concealed carry?
One is the amount of training required, one's an all-day, including range qualification. The other is a 90-minute online video. Enhanced, you can carry open or concealed. Enhanced, you have about 2 more states, like Washington State, that you can carry in that you can't with the concealed only. There are a couple of situations that are very unique, like, for example, school teachers have to have the enhanced permit versus the concealed if they're gonna carry on campus. So there's some differences, but between the two, as a practical matter, I will tell you as an attorney that defends people that have used guns, I'd rather represent someone in front of a jury that has the enhanced permit and has had state range training as opposed to a Mario Brothers video. You know, just talk to a juror that's never had a gun in their hand. Yes?
What about carrying a rifle and a shotgun and stuff? 'Cause
You can in your vehicle, but you can't carry it in public. We have legislation pending that would have converted us from a handgun permitting system to a firearms permitting system. Chris Todd, I think, had that in the House, and it was shot down, I think, in civil sub.
so much like hunting or something of that order?
Yeah, if you're hunting or going to a gun range, but if you just wanted to, schlep it around because you like shotguns better than semi-automatics for self-defense, it's more effective.
Well, then you get into the federal definition of an AR pistol versus a rifle.
Yeah, that's coming, but right now, you could, with the Tennessee handgun permit, carry an AR pistol, as long as the barrel's less than 12 inches. Or the AK pistol, yeah.
Do you list on your website, when your legislation's coming up and what committees, and do you list the vote?
We, at the beginning of legislative session, will generate a series of emails, usually once a week, of every bill that's filed that we're tracking. Of the 1,500 that Jay referenced, we normally track somewhere between 50 and 70 every session. And then every week, I write and send out an email that says, these are the bills that are up next week. These are the ones that we think are important, that need help. These are the ones that are bad, and we're gonna urge you to call your members and oppose them. And that, you go to our main website, hit the subscribe button, it's free. You don't even have to be a member to get that information.
And you can even click on the links, and with that, it'll send you to view live in committee, so you could stream it, watch the committees in action as well.
And then at the end of session, we send out a session report that analyzes everything that passed.
Okay.
Yes.
Man over here.
Let me get here and come back. Go ahead.
I have a concealed weapons permit. I've had it for years. I went through the all-day course down in Columbia years ago when things were getting started. I just looked at my permit. How can you tell if you have, I should have the enhanced, but.
Well, so the concealed permit only became available January 1 of 2020. And it will actually say concealed on it in big letters. If yours is older than January 1, 2020, or if you took the all-day class with range training, you have the enhanced permit. The enhanced permit just says handgun carry permit. It doesn't have the word enhanced on it.
It does handgun carry permit, and it should be enhanced.
That's the
I just want to be sure.
Yeah, it's the enhanced, and if you have the lifetime permit, it's the enhanced, because it's only available as an enhanced.
I renew it, you know, when it comes to.
Okay, over here.
First of all,
Same thing.
we always have Republicans and we have Democrats. Republicans normally were in our line of thinking. Today, when you go look at the candidates that are running, they're what, they're all independents. Where the hell that's supposed to be? Which country they from? I got it.
Yeah. Well, if you remember,
Who are we gonna vote for?
way back when, and of course, it's the first president I voted for was Reagan. And what was interesting, then we went on to Bush, and then Ross Perot shows up running as an independent, and he made a lot of sense. But back in those days, it was he pulled a lot of the Republican to the independent thinking.
Yeah.
And now today, we've got a lot of our friends and neighbors are not about to tell you that they're a Democrat. And so they're independent.
Yeah, but so how do we
But,
know if
but
they're
then,
not?
and you ask a good question, because right now we're finding out Republicans and Democrats both are calling themselves independent. And that's the challenge is you gotta get connected with the website. You're trying to find out, is this a good conservative person? But then again, I've seen new members come in that after a cup of coffee is like, hey, we're gonna work well together. And then a year later, it's like, I don't even know who they are. They have done the political, went to their head, and it's like, oh my gosh.
Jay,
Jim?
you just need more good people on the SEC, state executive committee of the Republican Party, and get more people, more Democrats off the ballot.
And that would be Jim Pope.
That would be me.
Yeah. Exactly, Jim.
I hear you, but it's not, at the state level is not only our problem either. Because that was 4 years ago, the Democrat political platform is, they knew that they were never going to be in the supermajority in the state of Tennessee for the next 20 years. Therefore, they drew the line in the sand and said, we're going after your school boards, your county commissioners, your city councils, your district attorneys, your local judges. We're going to rule at the very rural level. And that's where I keep, it's every time I go talk to groups, I said, we've got to search out and find who those, to me, a Christian conservative person, because House District 74, when I first won, it was owned by the Democrats. It was the little old ladies at church. It was friends of mine that I worked with for years. They were conservative Democrats. And a lot of them were saying, well, it was Neil C. He passed away. Cancer got him. But old Neil C. said, Jay, you're just trying to get me to become a Republican. I said, I'm not trying to get you to do nothing. I want you to just pay attention to what's going on in our world and start thinking about our kids and grandkids and what they're going to inherit when we're gone. And if we're not willing to fight for them, who will? And lo and behold, John Tidwell, the Democrat I beat, 18-year incumbent, his voting record now, the last two primaries, he's been voting Republican. He finally saw the light of day.
Yeah, but
Okay,
as far as.
so that's what we're finding out is there's people that are conservative Democrats, they don't have a clue that why they vote Democrat, they're finding wising up. So that's where I'm relying, and now House District 74 is 62% Republican. Did we have that many new people come to town and just start voting Republican? No. And that's where I still extend my hand, because I'm gonna find out there's a lot of conservative Democrats, because they believe in God, they wanna keep their guns, and they're leaving the so-called Democrat Party because of their liberal ideas and Pelosi ideas and Biden ideas and all of that stuff.
If I remember correctly.
So with that, it's getting out, challenge the people running for office. pick their brain.
Yeah.
And it's not gonna be easy.
Well, I was just gonna say, if I remember correctly, back in the early sixties, or maybe even the mid-sixties, the Democrat Party was the party of the NRA, the party that supported the NRA. It wasn't the Republican Party back then.
Well, it totally changed, you know,
It
with
changed.
the back of the time of John F. Kennedy
Yeah.
and what they stood for. And, it's crazy. And of course, John would tell you that too. It was a lot of good things happened under the Democrats when they were in the majority for firearms.
Kennedy would probably be in the conservative Republican caucus if he was in the General Assembly. We've got too many Republicans that are left of Kennedy, that are running ads today calling themselves deep conservative.
And lying.
But we need to define conservative.
Oh, sure, everybody's a conservative this election cycle.
So one question, what do we do about not just lobbying our representatives and senators, but changing the attitudes of some of these groups like the Sheriff's Association, for instance, so that they're more in favor of constitutional carry instead of being against what we want to accomplish? How do we do that? Is there a way?
The policy of the Sheriff's Association is dictated by 95 sheriffs. And you've got to wear yours out. Because if you don't, the Sheriff's Association's board is going to decide, and that's a small cluster of them, it's an oligarchy, what the policy, but they're from the bigger communities, okay? The other thing that you might look at is, under federal law, a charity, a 501c3, is severely restricted on lobbying activities. And to the extent they can do it, it has to be consistent with their mission statement. The Sheriff's Association is a 501c3. The Sheriff's Association's mission statement is to train sheriffs and raise benevolent funds for deputies and families that injured in the line. There's nothing in their mission statement that says they're down there lobbying the General Assembly on DUI laws or anything else.
Right.
So there's a serious question. And matter of fact, when a charity files a 990, which is their version of a tax return, they have to disclose on there whether or not they engage in any lobbying activity. And you file that under penalty of perjury. Those are available public records that are online. You can just Google it. The Sheriff's Association's federal tax returns filed under penalty of perjury state they do not engage in lobbying activities. And the problem is, and we've started working with some legislators on this, is the legislators, and there's a culture, are so used to seeing the Sheriff's Association as benevolent advisors looking out for the interest of the public, that they've allowed them to violate federal law and to come down there and in the name of the association, and the chiefs of police do the same thing, they're a C3 as well. And what they're doing is they're telling our elected representatives what they think the law ought to be. Well, they didn't elect them. I mean, Jay may get one sheriff's vote or two or three, but look how many constituents he's got. And there's a big difference, because the simple fact is law enforcement's got to function. But it's not necessarily making sure that all of your constitutional rights are protected.
And they're testifying in committee. They're being invited to testify by our representatives in committee hearings, and we're not showing up. All of us can show up to any committee hearing and ask to testify, and we're not showing up. There's 9 people in a committee hearing for judiciary in the House, right? 9 people over a new tax. That's all that's sitting in the gallery.
There's a sheriff out in, 2 of them out in Arizona, might be more, but I think it's Pinal County, and the other one would have been Phoenix, one's Phoenix. And that sheriff, those 2 sheriffs, started an organization in which they called it a citizens training thing. And he thought he would have a couple hundred maybe sign up. he had 3,500 citizens sign up to go through the sheriff's training and educational course on Constitution. Do you know about this?
Mhm.
Yeah, I thought that was very good.
It is, and we've got a couple of sheriffs, like Guy Buck in Tennessee, that they will sign, I mean, we circulated it to all of them. For example, do you support real constitutional carry? We have like 3 sheriffs sign it.
Well, we have a sheriff that has said that if the county commission were to pass any restrictive gun law, that he would enforce the law they passed with no regard to the Constitution. And it looks like he's about to get reelected.
Yeah, maybe he shouldn't.
Well, I know, but. It's all-
Run against him.
Yeah, I can concede that.
Yes.
How did Houston County Sheriff, did he sign off on it or not?
I can't tell you off the cuff, because it's been a while since I looked at those. I know there were just 3 that did. And Guy Buck's one of them, because Guy Buck's one, and there's another one over near, Jackson that did, and I can't tell you who the third one is. It's West Tennessee, I do know that, but I'm not sure where.
Back there in the corner.
Could you please clarify something for me? On the enhanced carry permit, did you say that you can carry concealed as well as open? And then the second question?
Yes.
If you have the enhanced, does your carry permit actually say that?
No,
Okay,
it just says hang and carry permit.
okay, all right, then I'm legal.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions for John? All right, let's give him a big hand and I got some information. We meet normally the first Thursday of every month, but we're a 3-county chapter, so we rotate. So the next meeting will be in Henry County. Now, I'll turn that over to them here in just a second. I don't know if everybody signed in, I don't think everybody did, but we do a little giveaway at the end of these meetings. So if anybody's interested in signing in, you're gonna have a chance here to get a hat if you're interested. If not, I'm gonna go ahead and turn it over to Christy from Henry County. She'll tell you about the next meeting, where it's at.
Okay, I'm Christy Casey, I'm from Puryear, Henry County, and the next meeting is gonna be on Thursday, September the 1st. It's gonna be in Puryear at Laird's Barbecue, right on the corner of, I think it's Main Street and 641. We're gonna have a speaker, her name, I have her little bio here, let me give it to you real quick. Amy Washington Owens. She is a private investigator from 1998 to 1999, military police officer 1997 to 2000, combat engineer 2000 to 2004, a tour in Iraq 2003-2004. She's a licensed mental health counselor 2008 to present. She's a homesteader 2005 to present. And she's going to do a presentation that I think maybe a lot of people will be interested in. It's going to be on home invasion. And a rough outline is the statistics of home invasion, the legality, preparing your home and yourself, and prevention. And then should you go into, you would have something like Mr. Clark this last time, a reaction and defense and recovery. So it's going to be a really, really good meeting. We're going to start at 5:45. You can order food. You can call in. There's a menu online for Laird's Barbecue. You can pre-order. At 7 o'clock, the program will start. We're going to have a meeting room in the back there, and it's absolutely delicious food, cooked off the menu to order. So any questions on that? And then we're going to have, hopefully, we'll have somebody with the Henry County legal to back up a lot of the stuff that'll be done. So we look forward to seeing you.
Appreciate everybody coming out tonight. We'll do the draw here in just a minute. If you want to sign up, still got a couple minutes. Like I say, we meet the first Thursday of every month unless we have to reschedule for things like elections.
Thursday, September 1st.